Welcome to the world of Culture Pop with Steve Mason and Sue Kalinsky. Culture, comedy, movies, TV, tech, authors, trends, pop. This is the Culture Pop Podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason. We're recording on Saturday, March the 28th. This is episode 42 of the podcast. Unfortunately, as we continue to shelter in place, Sue Kalinsky is at her house and can't join us. Chris Morales, not here, but technically we've been able to work it out with Skype, so we're going ahead with the podcast. Juan, the technical wizard, was able to figure this out, and we got a great guest today. Great actor. And Culture Pop is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Imrani. If you or somebody you know, wife, son, friend, involved in any kind of accident, you want somebody with 24 years of experience on your side, that is Jacob Imrani. First guy to start dealing with Uber and Lyft accidents, and it is a proven fact that he has dealt with more Uber and Lyft accidents than anybody in the country. He's a pro. He's got a team of 50 people. Call him 24 hours a day, night or day, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB. 844-24-JACOB. Or remember, accident or injury, call Jacob Imrani. Call Jacob. Pretty good. Not a bad voice. All right. I love this show. And this actor is unbelievable. HBO's got a miniseries right now called The Plot Against America. It's about what would have happened if Charles Lindbergh, a staunch isolationist and possibly a Nazi sympathizer, had been elected president in 1940. It is from David Simon and Ed Burns, who are the guys behind the show The Wire and The Deuce. And our guest is just a phenomenal actor, Broadway actor, and now the star of The Plot Against America. Morgan Spector is with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Morgan.
Hi, Steve. I'm doing great. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I was completely blown away by this show. I had never read the Philip Roth novel, so it was all a surprise for me. Had you read the novel before you were approached about the miniseries?
Yeah, I had actually. I'm a Roth fan going back ways, and I had read it. I think a year or so after it came out. I think maybe when it came out in paperback. But yeah, I knew the novel, and I didn't. I had forgotten. I think when you revisit the novel, which was written in 2004. I think there are some sort of striking and obvious parallels to our current political environment, and it was really, I didn't remember how prescient the novel was because I read it at the time, and it seemed to have a kind of it seemed relevant to the Bush era, but not as sort of jarringly as it does to the Trump era.
Yeah. So David Simon and Ed Burns, the guys behind The Wire, for which my money, one of the top 3 shows of all time. Where does it rank for you?
Yeah, I'd put it right in there. I mean, I think you've got The Wire, you've got The Sopranos. I think the third slot is a conversation, but I think The Wire is going to be in there no matter who you talk to.
So it's interesting. You almost had a role in a David Simon project, but it didn't quite work out. But somehow it led to this one, right?
Yeah, that's right. I had auditioned for The Deuce, and I heard through my agent that I was going to get the offer, that it was coming to me, and then I got a call the next day, and they said, "Oh, actually, we're very sorry, but the guy we had originally offered to someone else, we thought there was a scheduling problem, but there isn't, and he's going to do it." And it was, it was a screw up. It very rarely happens. They were extremely apologetic. David himself wrote me a very nice email about it. And yeah, he said in the email, "Hey, nice audition, and we'll see you sometime down the line." And yeah, I didn't expect them to offer me a part like this. This was sort of beyond my wildest dreams, for sure.
So I want to talk about the show, but I also want to talk about your career a little bit. From reading about you, it sounds like acting is it fair to say the only thing you ever wanted to do?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is fair to say. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that I've ended up being an actor, but yeah, I think it is. You know, at a certain point, I look around and realize that it was the thing I'd actually been doing the longest. I've been casting about, I think, in my life to what's the one thing I should do? What's the thing I'm really good at? And I don't think I thought I was like I don't know. Maybe nobody does, but I certainly didn't look at myself and think, oh, I'm an acting genius. This is like my one true calling. But at the same time, I thought, well, this is the thing that I've actually been invested in. So maybe it's just the thing I like doing, and maybe that's enough. Maybe I should just continue to do the thing that I like doing, and I have, and nobody's really made me stop yet. So I think I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, and you should. By the way, you did a play when you were a little kid for community theater. Mm-hmm. What was the play? My first role, I played. There was a little rep company in the county I grew up in a little seaside town, Jenner, which is pretty close to where I grew up, and Jenner, California, and it was called River Repertory Theater, and they used to do, holiday shows but also interesting contemporary plays, and they were doing Christopher Durang's Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All for You, which I remember being like a pretty racy comedy. I actually haven't had to play in years. But I was playing Thomas, who is this young Catholic boy who's just reached the age of reason, and it sort of functions in the play as sort of the straight man for Sister Mary Ignatius. But, as the straight man often does, Thomas gets a lot of great laughs, and I remember just having that first experience as being in front of an audience. It was my first part in a play. Sort of my mom's friends are the people who ran the theater, and they sort of were like, well, who were like the 7-year-olds who could memorize lines? And she threw me in there. But yeah, I just remember getting a laugh for the first time, thinking, man, this is good. This is a good thing. So you were originally going to do on Broadway a small part in A View from the Bridge, but you ended up as the lead. How'd that happen?
Not exactly the lead, but I did end up in one of the sort of main parts in the show. I was in A View from the Bridge, and Liev Schreiber and Scarlett Johansson were the stars. Liev was playing Eddie Carbone, and I was playing a longshoreman who kind of has like a couple of lines in one scene, and but I was also covering Rodolfo, who was playing opposite Scarlett Johansson, and the guy who actually was cast in the role, he was injured about a week into previews, and they put me on. And we hadn't rehearsed. I had sort of met Scarlett in passing, and then it was like, okay, that night, you got to go on and play. And it was fairly terrifing. But unfortunately, the guy who was in that role was never able to return. So I got to take over the part and open it, which was sort of. It's one of those crazy, impossible, lucky things that you kind of need to have happen if you're going to be fortunate enough to work in this business. So you are married to the great actress Rebecca Hall. I just found one of her movies on Netflix, just tooling around, called Christine. She is just brilliant in that movie. How did you meet Rebecca? It is a great film, Christine. Anybody who hasn't seen it, go out and see it, because it's honestly, I think when people look back at this era, they're going to say that was one of the great films of the period. And I think, and thank you, I appreciate you saying that. But we met doing a play. We met doing the play Machinal in 2014. We opened, and it's like a late 20s American Expressionist play. Directed by Lindsay Turner, and Rebecca and I met each other through that production.
So, I do 5 days a week on ESPN. And then I do a couple of podcasts every Saturday. So I usually do.
Wow.
Usually do 7 shows a week, but every show is completely different. What's it like doing the same show 8 shows a week?
Yeah, well, it's the same. I'm sure you notice this every day too, but you're different every day. Your voice sounds different. Your body feels different. You're in a different mood. There's different stuff going on in your actual life. And not only that, everything you've learned from the day before is in your head, and it wasn't the day before, right? And so you're different. Your experience has changed you even a little bit. And when you're doing a play, I find, that's everything you've learned from the previous night's performance, you bring to bear on on that night's performance. And so it is always different. And I think you're always, I find, one of the pleasures of a longish run, and I've never run I've done, I think 4 months is about as long as I've done. And, one of the pleasures is that you get to keep chasing it. You keep chasing a deeper exploration of the character, a sort of, truer performance of a moment. You get to keep trying to make it simpler. That's the kind of discipline and pleasure of it. It's like what's that documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yes.
Where it's like the practice is you do the same thing every day and you just try to perfect it. And I sort of think that's the joy of the repetition of theater. Yeah.
Let's talk about Plot Against America, which I've had the benefit of seeing the whole thing because HBO sent it to me in advance. So I know how it ends and I know the story. It's absolutely chilling. Sort of describe the story for people.
Yeah, well, it's basically the premise is Roth in the novel, and we in our miniseries imagine what if the great American aviator Charles Lindbergh, who was a huge celebrity and American hero, beloved by all, and was also an avid isolationist, wanted to keep America out of what was going to be the Second World War, and also something of a pretty vicious anti-Semite. What if he, in an effort to keep America out of the war, had run against Franklin Roosevelt in 1940 and won, and had done so on an isolationist platform, and had then kept America out of the war and formed an alliance with Hitler? But what might have happened then? And we see that's the sort of basic setup, and then we follow that story as it unfolds through the experience of, in the novel, to the experience of 8-year-old Philip Roth, and in our miniseries to the experience of the Levin family. The name's been changed, and sort of through all of their perspectives, Herman, the father, Bess, the mother, and Philip and Sandy, the 2 children. And additionally, Alvin, Herman's nephew, we see his story, and he's the one who takes a kind of heroic stand against the sort of onrushing forces. Yeah.
And then the rabbi, who takes more of a kind of appeasement position with
exactly.
what would have been President Lindbergh.
Right. Yeah, he's a collaborator.
So was Lindbergh, and I don't know the answer to this, was Lindbergh a Nazi sympathizer?
Well, the detail that he was given an Iron Cross by the Nazi government is true. So he, but whether that demonstrated, and it certainly is true that he gave the speech that he gives in the show is historically accurate. That is a speech he gave called the Des Moines speech, and he accuses the Jews essentially of dual loyalty and of sort of agitating for war in their own interests, which he, in his mind, are distinct from the interests of real Americans. And elsewhere in his writings, diaries, he expresses anti-Semitic views. So I don't know that he would call himself a Nazi sympathizer, but the America Firsters that the organization that he was part of, did have a kind of alliance with the German American Bund, which was explicitly a Nazi sympathizing group. So he certainly wasn't anti-Nazi to the extent that one would have wished. Yeah.
I never knew because obviously we've heard the president use this slogan, America First. I never knew the real poison behind it, which is one of the things that was really shocking to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's why, when he used it, I don't know that he knew that either. I mean, I think, I think he certainly didn't back off of it when it became, when people reacted to his use of it. I really couldn't say, but certainly the origins of that phrase are fairly ugly. Yeah.
Your character, Herman, while friends are fleeing to Canada, believes in America, and believes the country will pull through what is a temporary time. Sort of, how do you relate that to what's going on now?
Well, I mean, I think the parallel, probably when Roth wrote the novel, was more to, Germany, before, as the Nazis were sort of rising in power, because there were many German Jews who felt themselves to be, maybe Germans first, or at least, that they were, they couldn't imagine that the country they loved and felt so integrated into, felt so much a part of, this very sophisticated, highly, cosmopolitan nation would ever reject them because they were Jews. It didn't. They felt so certain in their citizenship and in their belonging, and I think that is maybe the really obvious parallel. But yeah, I think. I think a lot about I don't know if you remember, I remember walking into bodegas or getting into taxi cabs in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and anybody who was Muslim or could be perceived to be Muslim had American flags on their cars, and or prominently displayed somewhere. And maybe in some cases that was prophylactic, and maybe in some cases it was just people expressing solidarity with the country that they called their own. And I don't think, I think it's probably a fairly common immigrant experience when you come somewhere and you do feel a sense of belonging. You feel that sense of belonging quite deeply. And I think that's certainly where, Herman is, I think, second generation in our story. And I think, he just, he feels America is his home, and it's given him a lot. He believes in it, and I don't think he can imagine going anywhere else.
It feels a little bit like that analogy of the frog jumps into boiling water and it jumps back out. But if you put the frog in the water and bring it to a boil, the frog doesn't sense the danger. I think that's right. That analogy feels very relevant to what went on in Germany and what went on in Europe and what goes on with the American Jews in Plot Against America.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a big part of it. And certainly there are some characters who realize that the water's about to boil. And I think Bess is one of them. I mean, Herman's wife, Bess, is certainly saying, things are bad and they're going to get worse. She sees what's coming with much greater lucidity than Herman does. But that's his nature. And ultimately, I think he comes to understand that. But I think too, this was something I was thinking about a lot as I played this part. I think there's if you're especially in that time, you're the patriarch, you're the man of the house, you're the great defender of the home. And I think there's something about the ego of a person in that situation that doesn't allow you to see that you're weak, that you're vulnerable, that the forces of history are bigger and more powerful than you. And so you try to pretend that you're not just about to be obliterated by them. But there's an element of that too, that even if you do see it, you keep pretending that you don't, because it means that you have to give up your status as protector. You have to admit that you're just an ordinary weak person in the face of these larger, more powerful forces.
The scene that gets me is the scene at the Lincoln Memorial where Herman is attacked as a loudmouth Jew, and then the family returns and they're basically evicted from the hotel. What was that? Sort of feels like the heart of the story to me, the heart of the crisis. What was it like playing those scenes?
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, there's something pig-headed about Herman, that he understands that the world is changing, maybe has changed, and yet he kind of forces his family into this confrontation with that change. He drives into the heart of the beast and kind of bulls his way through every scenario, and is ultimately humiliated and humbled, and his wife suffers as a result. And I think he finally begins to see that. He finally begins to shift a little bit. And I think that's very satisfying, that moment when a character starts to change, when their perspective starts to alter a little bit. I think those are always fun moments in a story. But I love those scenes. I love that episode's about to air this week, and I'm excited. I hope people enjoy it. But it's also it's one of the episodes that Hughes, or at least scene-wise, on the level of the scenes, Hughes most closely to the writing. Ross really wrote that scene, particularly the one in the deli. But what was crazy about, I mean, I don't know how much time you have here, but what was crazy about shooting those scenes was that you can't actually film inside the Lincoln Memorial with more than 5 people at a time, and they won't close it. Yeah, so 5 people we had 4 people in the scene. That means you can't really have a sound guy. You can't have a boom op. Oh, and you can't record sound. They don't allow microphones in the Lincoln Memorial of any kind, which in the days of cell phones seems anachronistic to me. But you can't record sound in the Lincoln Memorial. So everything had to be ADR'd. We had to have, basically you had 4 people in the scene, but you could only have 2 of them there at a time. You had to pretend that the other people were there in the scene, talk to them as if they were there, and then we tiled them in later with special effects.
Wow.
I mean, it was the weirdest. They spent about, weeks planning how they could possibly shoot this scene. It was such an insanely complicated enterprise. But you'd never know it watching it. It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm going to have to go back and look at it now that I hear that, to see how it all came together. So are you living in New York?
Yeah. I'm upstate. We have a place upstate, and we're up there now. So,
because New York is kind of the heart of this coronavirus crisis. What's life like for you?
Well, we're self-isolating. We've got a couple friends staying with us and my mom, and we're all, everything is on pause. The whole world is on pause, and we're. Nobody can really work. I mean, what we're doing is about as close to working as I can do. So it's strange. It's just, I don't know. I don't really know what's going to come out of this. I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard at this moment to see what's around the corner. But I just hope. I feel very fortunate that no one in my family is sick yet. I'm doing everything I can to keep that being the case, and I hope that I think it's sort of everybody who isn't sick, everybody who isn't dealing with an immediate crisis. I think it's our job to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that people who are being forced out of work right now are being taken care of in some way. And, this big relief bill that just passed, it was something. I don't think it's enough. And it's kind of insane to think that a $2.2 trillion relief bill is not close to enough to take care of people who are out of work. But I don't think it is. I think we're going to see more of that. And I hope the next one we see, this one I don't know. I don't have anything insightful to say about this. It's too large to really see right now.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm like everybody else. I'm some schmuck sheltering in place, hoping I don't screw up and bring some, virus into my house and give it to my mother. That's basically the deal.
It's surreal. It is surreal, and it's tragic, and there have been so many deaths, and there's no way.
And there will be so many more.
Yeah. But I wonder if there's so many people that have decided, I'm going to write a screenplay, I'm going to write a book with this downtime, I'm going to create something. I wonder if great art will come out of this period.
I mean, I hope so. Great art is always good, but I it's like, how much great art will you trade for somebody's life?
Yeah, no question.
And not much. I don't know. Like, I love art as much as the next person. I think it stands the test of time, but you can't eat it, and you can't. You can't snuggle with it at night. We've got to keep as many people alive as we can, I think. But yes, look, I hope so. It's like, you hear me sort of groping to try to come to grips with what's happening around us. And I think, that is what great artists can do. Great artists can penetrate, they have the kind of vision that can penetrate to the heart of a moment, a historical moment, an emotional moment. And, I think we need that. There's no question. We need people with that kind of vision to sort of show us what we're going through right now.
Well, we also need great television, and The Plot Against America is that. You are phenomenal in this miniseries.
Thank you so much.
Such amazing work, and it is so moving and chilling, and will give people really something to think about as we're all kind of looking for something to watch on television and to experience. It's an amazing piece of work.
Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Morgan.
Accident or injury, call Jacob and Ronnie. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mace. If you or a loved one is injured in any kind of accident, please don't wait. Call Jacob immediately for a free consultation. That's right, free. When an accident happens, it can turn your world upside down, so put the best on your side. Jacob doesn't even get paid unless you win. First name, first thought, first call, Jacob. After an accident, 24 hours a day, call 844-24-JACOB or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
All right, there you have it, Morgan Spector, who is, he's really, really a fine actor. And in this role as Herman in The Plot Against America is incredible. It's a heavy watch. Last week we had Jennifer Robertson from Schitt's Creek on the show. Couldn't be a more different watch than The Plot Against America. But if you love The Wire, if you love The Deuce, David Simon and Ed Burns are incredible, and this is based on the Philip Roth novel. It is awesome. It's on HBO. We're a few episodes into it. The first couple are on demand. Check it out, The Plot Against America on HBO. Thanks a lot for listening to the Culture Pop Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We always appreciate that, and we will see you next week.
Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next week for an all-new episode of Culture Pop.